The day I found out my husband was having an affair with my son's fiancée began like any other Saturday. The sky was soft and gray, the kind of morning that begged for coffee and quiet. I was in the kitchen, still in my robe, whisking pancake batter while humming along to an old Marvin Gaye song playing on the radio. Elijah was upstairs, still asleep after another late night of wedding planning with Madison. Their big day was 3 weeks away. I should have been excited, right? My only son getting married, starting his own life. But something in the air had been off lately, a heaviness in the spaces between conversations. Madison had become distant, and Franklin, my husband of 25 years, had started spending more time working late. I told myself it was stress, wedding madness, or maybe just my own nerves. I had no idea how wrong I was. My sister Aisha called mid-morning, as she always did. She worked as a private investigator, something I used to joke was perfect for her nosy nature. That day, though, her voice wasn't teasing. "Simone," she said softly, "I think you should sit down." My hand froze mid-stir. There was something about the way she said it, too calm, too careful, that made my heart start pounding. "What's wrong?" I asked, my throat suddenly dry. "It's Franklin," she said, and my stomach dropped. "He's been meeting someone at the St. Regis, regularly, for months." I felt the room tilt. I forced out a shaky laugh. "Aisha, please, that's impossible. He's been preparing for Elijah's wedding. He barely has time to breathe." She hesitated. "Simone, I have pictures." The word hung between us like smoke. Pictures. I didn't ask her to send them right away. I think part of me still wanted to believe there was an explanation, some misunderstanding, some benign coincidence. But when the text came through, I couldn't breathe. There he was, my husband, in the parking lot of the St. Regis, his hand on the back of a woman I couldn't see clearly. The next photo was clearer. Madison, my son's fiancée, my future daughter-in-law. Her face tilted up to his, their lips locked in a kiss that looked anything but accidental. My phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the tile. The sound seemed to echo forever. My world, the one I had built brick by brick for a quarter of a century, cracked right down the middle. Aisha's voice came through the phone, faint but urgent. "Simone, are you there?" I couldn't answer. My breath came in short gasps. I pressed my hands against the counter to steady myself, but the nausea rose so fast I barely made it to the sink before I threw up. When I finally managed to speak, my voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat, almost detached. "Send me everything." Aisha didn't argue. Within minutes, my phone was flooded. Photos, timestamps, even a video clip from a hotel lobby camera. Franklin and Madison entering together, laughing, Franklin touching her arm the way he used to touch mine when we were still new. I scrolled through them all, numb, cold, my fingers trembling. When I reached the last photo, I sat down on the floor, clutching my knees like a child. That was how Elijah found me an hour later, sitting in silence with the phone beside me. "Mom," he asked, kneeling down, "what happened?" For a moment I thought about lying. About saying I just felt dizzy, that I was fine. But when I looked into his face, the same dark eyes he'd inherited from his father, I couldn't. "It's your father," I whispered, "and Madison." He frowned. "What about them?" I opened the photo gallery and handed him the phone. I watched as his expression shifted, confusion, disbelief, and then horror. His jaw tightened, and for a long moment he said nothing. Then he threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a sharp crack. "No," he said, his voice raw. "No, that's not real. That can't be real." "I'm sorry," I murmured, though the words felt meaningless. He stood, pacing, running his hands through his hair. "She told me she loved me," he said, almost to himself. "She told me I was the only one." His voice broke on the last word. I stood slowly, reached for him. But he pulled away. "I can't." He stopped, his chest heaving. "I need to go." "Elijah!" But he was already gone, the front door slamming behind him. I stood in the kitchen surrounded by the shattered remains of our morning. Cold coffee, burnt pancakes, a phone face down on the tile. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely dial Aisha. "We can't just let them get away with this," I said. My voice was still calm, but underneath it was something new. Steel. "Can you help me?" She didn't hesitate. "You tell me what you want to do." I looked around at the wreckage of my life, the house that suddenly felt like a stranger's. "I want the truth to come out," I said quietly. "Every last bit of it." For the next week, we worked quietly, methodically. Aisha set up discreet surveillance, gathered financial records, traced phone calls. What she uncovered went far beyond an affair. There were suspicious withdrawals from our retirement fund, strange charges on Franklin's business account, and a luxury necklace Madison had been flaunting at her bridal shower. That, according to receipts, had been purchased with my money. I felt sick with every new discovery, but I didn't stop. Not this time. The day before the wedding rehearsal, Aisha came over with a small flash drive and a grim smile. "This is everything," she said, handing it to me. "Are you sure you're ready?" I stared at it in my palm, the weight of my decision pressing down. "I'm ready." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark living room, the glow of the laptop illuminating photo after photo, document after document. Somewhere between heartbreak and fury, a strange clarity settled over me. Tomorrow. The truth would come out. Franklin and Madison thought they had buried their lies deep enough to stay hidden forever, but they had underestimated the woman who had kept this family running for 25 years. By dawn, I had a plan, and as the first light filtered through the blinds, I looked at my reflection in the window. A woman exhausted, yes, but not broken. Not anymore. Tomorrow, they would see what happens when a wife who's been deceived for too long finally stops pretending everything is fine, and for the first time in days, I almost smiled. The morning of the rehearsal dawned bright and deceptively peaceful, the kind of Georgia spring day that made you forget that storms ever existed. Birds sang outside my window as if the world hadn't just fallen apart. I stood before the mirror, curling my hair, applying makeup with deliberate precision. Every motion felt mechanical, rehearsed, detached from the chaos inside me. Franklin was already at the venue. His text that morning had been short and cheerful, as if nothing were wrong. "See you soon. Big day tomorrow. Love you." I stared at those 3 words for a long time before deleting the message. Love. What a cruel word when spoken by a man who'd spent months in another woman's arms. Worse, my son's fiancée's. The drive to the venue was surreal. Everything looked too normal. The garden had been transformed into a fairy tale scene. Rows of white chairs, pastel roses climbing the archway, the scent of fresh hydrangeas in the air. Staff bustled about with trays of champagne and laughter that felt too loud. A part of me wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled and nodded. Playing the dutiful wife and mother. That was what I'd done all my life, pretend. Not today. Aisha was already there when I arrived, dressed in her catering uniform, blending in perfectly. She caught my eye across the courtyard and gave me a small, knowing nod. My heart steadied. Everything was in place. The flash drive was tucked safely into my purse. The laptop was set up behind the altar, connected to the big projection screen that was supposed to display Elijah and Madison's childhood photos. It would still do that, just not in the way anyone expected. I walked through the guests, smiling tightly, my chest hollow. Madison's parents were there already, Judge and Mrs. Ellington, pillars of Atlanta society. Her mother waved at me, oblivious. Her father looked at me the way rich men look at accountants, pleasantly dismissive. If only they knew. Madison herself appeared a few minutes later, radiant in a cream rehearsal dress, her hair falling in soft curls. She looked every bit the blushing bride, but when our eyes met, I saw it. The flicker of panic, the quick dart of her gaze toward Franklin, who stood stiffly beside her. Good, let her sweat. Franklin avoided my eyes entirely, fiddling with his tie. He looked handsome as always, impeccably dressed, smiling at guests, but I could see the faint tremor in his hand. He knew something was off. He just didn't know what. Not yet. The rehearsal began. The officiant spoke warmly, running through the vows, the timing, the cues for the music. I watched from the second row, hands folded neatly in my lap, heart pounding. Elijah was quiet, distant. He hadn't spoken much since he'd seen those photos. But he was here. Standing tall, going through the motions for the sake of appearances. He glanced at Madison once, his expression unreadable. When it ended, Franklin approached me, trying for his usual charm. "You okay, honey? You've been quiet." I turned to him, forcing a small smile. "Just tired," I said softly. "Weddings are a lot." He chuckled, relieved, slipping his arm around my waist. I didn't pull away. "Not yet. It'll all be worth it tomorrow," he said. "Our family, finally complete." The irony nearly made me choke. "Yes," I whispered. "Complete." That night, I barely slept. Every detail of my plan replayed in my mind, sharp and clear. The flash drive, the order of the slides, the sequence of revelations. I wasn't just exposing infidelity. I was dismantling the lie of a lifetime, and I needed it to be perfect. By morning, the house buzzed with pre-wedding chaos. Florists, stylists, caterers. It was a parade of noise and nerves. I dressed in a soft lavender gown, understated but elegant. Franklin told me I looked beautiful. I thanked him. He kissed my cheek, the same lips that had kissed Madison. I didn't flinch. Elijah was silent during the drive. His jaw was clenched, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "You don't have to go through with this," I told him quietly. "We can walk away right now." He shook his head. "No, Mom, they don't get to keep pretending. Not after what they did." We arrived at the venue just as guests were filling the seats. The music floated through the air, soft strings, romantic and sweet. Everything was perfect, perfectly fake. Franklin was greeting guests with that practiced politician smile of his. Madison stood near the altar, radiant and trembling, clutching her bouquet like it might save her. I watched her laugh nervously with her bridesmaids, her eyes darting to the crowd every few seconds. She knew something wasn't right, and she was right to be afraid. When the officiant began to speak, the audience quieted. The ceremony unfolded beautifully at first. Vows, tears, applause. I stood near the back, my hand on the remote in my purse. A few slides into the slideshow of baby Elijah. I took a breath, steady and deep. Then I pressed the button. The music stopped. The slideshow flickered, and the screen changed. A photo appeared. Franklin and Madison in that familiar hotel parking lot. The timestamp clearly visible. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted. Madison froze, her bouquet slipping from her hands. Franklin turned pale. "This is a mistake," he stammered, stepping forward. "It's fake." But I didn't stop. Another photo appeared. Franklin and Madison again, this time in our living room, locked in a kiss that made bile rise in my throat. The audience erupted, whispers, shouts, people standing, craning their necks. Madison's mother clutched her chest. Her father's face went red. Franklin turned to me, eyes blazing. "What the hell are you doing, Simone?" "Showing them who you really are," I said calmly. My voice sounded distant, cold. He tried to lunge for the laptop, but Aisha stepped between us, her expression hard. "Don't even think about it." More images flashed, hotel receipts, bank transfers, jewelry purchases. Each one worse than the last. The noise of the crowd swelled, a tide of disbelief and scandal. "This is madness," Franklin shouted. "You're humiliating yourself." "No, Franklin," I said quietly. "You did that all by yourself." The last image appeared then, the one I debated showing at all, a DNA test result. The words, probability of paternity, 99.999%. And below it, a photo of a girl. Young, maybe 15, smiling shyly at the camera. "Meet Zoe," I said, my voice trembling with fury and pain. "Your daughter, the one you've been hiding from me and from Elijah for 15 years. The silence that followed was absolute. For a moment no one moved, then someone screamed. The wedding had become a battlefield of broken hearts, and I stood there in the middle of it, watching the life I'd built go up in flames. The silence that followed that final revelation felt endless, like the entire world had stopped breathing. Then, as if a dam had broken, the crowd erupted. Shouts, gasps, the scrape of chairs against the ground. Someone's glass shattered sharp against the marble. I stood still amid the chaos, my pulse hammering in my ears, the remote trembling in my hand. Madison's face had drained of all color. She stared at the screen, her lips trembling, unable to form words. Her mother had a hand over her mouth. Her father's expression was something between disbelief and pure, unfiltered rage. Franklin took one stumbling step toward me, his voice strangled. "Simone, turn it off. You don't know what you're doing." I looked at him then, really looked. His tailored suit, his carefully polished shoes, his once charming face now twisted in panic. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I'm showing everyone who you really are." Behind me, Aisha was already moving, quietly unplugging the projector's backup connection to make sure he couldn't stop the presentation. She stood there like a silent guardian, her expression unreadable. Franklin lunged toward the screen, but Elijah was faster. He stepped between us, his hand outstretched, his voice low and deadly. "Don't you dare," he said. "You don't get to touch a thing." The crowd fell into a hushed, tense silence as father and son faced each other. For a long, terrible moment, it felt like time itself was holding its breath. "Son," Franklin began, his voice breaking, "it's not what it looks like. She came on to me. I didn't—" "Don't," Elijah snapped. His eyes burned, and for the first time I saw a kind of fury in him that I had never seen before. Not the frustration of youth, but the righteous anger of a man betrayed by blood. "Don't you dare blame her for this. You were supposed to be better than that." Madison turned toward Elijah then, her mascara streaked down her face, her voice hoarse. "Elijah, I swear it wasn't supposed to happen like this," she cried. "I love you, I do." "Love?" Elijah's voice cracked on the word. "You slept with my father, Madison. You don't get to say you love me." His voice carried through the air, clear and sharp as glass. People turned away, whispering, their discomfort almost tangible. Franklin tried again, reaching toward his son, but Elijah stepped back, his entire body shaking. "You ruined everything," he said. "You and her. You took everything good in this family and poisoned it." Franklin's face contorted, half anger, half despair. "You don't understand." "No," Elijah cut in, his tone icy. "You don't understand. You had a wife who loved you, a son who admired you, and you threw it all away for a lie." His words hung in the air like a verdict. Madison stumbled backward, her knees buckling. A bridesmaid rushed forward to catch her, but Madison waved her off, sobbing. "This can't be happening," she whispered. "Please, someone tell me this isn't happening." "It's happening," I said softly, and she flinched like I had struck her. Every single bit of it. The guests were already filming. I could see the glow of dozens of phones lighting up. Franklin noticed too, panic flaring in his eyes. "Stop recording," he barked, but no one listened. His power, his authority, the smooth confidence that had carried him through every dinner party and business deal, it was gone. He looked small now, cornered. He turned to me again, his voice trembling. "Simone, please, we can fix this. Don't destroy everything we've built." I laughed then, a short, sharp sound that didn't feel like it came from me. "Everything we've built? Franklin, you already did that. You just didn't expect me to make you watch it burn." And that was the moment he broke. His mask slipped completely. The charm drained away, leaving only a desperate man exposed. "You think you're better than me?" he hissed. "You think you're innocent in all this? You've spent your whole life controlling everything. Me, Elijah, this family. Maybe if you hadn't been so busy being perfect, I wouldn't have needed someone else." Gasps rippled through the crowd again. My vision tunneled, fury flooding my veins. "Don't you dare blame me for your sins," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "You made your choices. You betrayed me. You betrayed your son." He took a step closer, his face twisted in something ugly. "And what are you going to do about it? Humiliate me in front of everyone? Congratulations, Simone, you've done it. You've destroyed our family." "No, Franklin," I whispered. "You did that the moment you decided your ego was worth more than your vows." Before he could reply, Madison screamed. It was a raw, broken sound that cut through the tension like a blade. She fell to her knees, clutching her stomach, sobbing uncontrollably. Her mother rushed to her side while her father stood frozen, fury radiating off him. "You disgust me," Judge Ellington said quietly to Franklin. "You've disgraced not only your wife and son, but my entire family. I will make sure you never work in this city again." Franklin turned on him, eyes blazing. "You think you're better than me, Judge? Check your own house before you judge mine." The judge took a threatening step forward, but Aisha intervened, placing herself squarely between them. "Enough," she said, her voice firm. "You might want to save what little dignity you have left, Franklin, because this—" she gestured to the crowd of whispering guests, the flashing cameras, the chaos, "isn't going away." Franklin's jaw clenched. He looked around, realizing the truth of her words. His career, his reputation, his life, it was all unraveling before his eyes. "You'll regret this, Simone," he spat. "Every bit of it." I met his gaze steadily. "No, Franklin. For the first time in years, I don't think I will." The tension snapped like a live wire. He turned and shoved past the guests, his movements wild, knocking over a table as he stormed toward the parking lot. People parted like water, whispering as he went. Aisha nodded subtly to one of the officers she'd arranged to be there. Her catering staff cover had its benefits. "He's not going far," she murmured. I didn't respond. My legs felt heavy, my body numb. I thought I'd feel satisfaction, vindication, but all I felt was hollow. The world I had built had truly collapsed, and all that was left was ruin. Elijah stepped to my side then, his hand finding mine. "It's over," he whispered. But I wasn't sure it was. Not yet. The damage Franklin had caused ran deeper than betrayal. There were lies within lies, ones I hadn't yet uncovered, and as I watched the flashing lights of police cars approaching from the distance, I knew the story wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The hours that followed were a blur of flashing lights, murmured questions, and the steady hum of disbelief that rippled through every corner of the garden. What had once been a place of celebration was now a crime scene of sorts, littered with discarded flowers, overturned champagne glasses, and the heavy residue of humiliation. Madison had been taken away in the back of a patrol car, her white dress soiled and torn, her mascara streaked into dark rivers across her cheeks. Her parents stood in stunned silence, holding each other but not speaking. Franklin was nowhere to be seen. He had fled the scene like a coward, leaving chaos in his wake. The police had taken statements from nearly everyone, but when they came to me, my words felt distant, detached, like I was narrating someone else's story. I told them the truth, every cold, brutal detail, about the affair, about the theft, about the years of deception that had rotted my marriage from the inside out. Elijah stayed beside me the entire time, his hand a steady anchor on my shoulder. I could feel the tremor in his fingers, though. Rage, grief, disbelief, all blending into something raw and unspoken. When the last officer finally left and the final guest slunk away, what remained of the wedding looked like the aftermath of a storm. The white chairs were scattered, the flowers trampled, and the altar, once so carefully arranged, stood like a monument to everything that had been destroyed. I sat there for a long while after everyone left, staring at the flickering remnants of the lights strung through the trees. The air smelled of wilted roses and spilled champagne. Aisha came over, a cup of water in her hand. "You did what needed to be done," she said quietly. I nodded, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. "He's gone," she continued. "Drove off like a bat out of hell. But he'll face what's coming." "He always does," I said softly. "He just never stays to see the aftermath." She sighed and squeezed my shoulder. "Come on, let's get you home." The days that followed felt like living in the ruins of someone else's life. Every news outlet had picked up the story. Scandal at Atlanta wedding. Groom's father exposed an affair with bride. The headlines were relentless. Photos of Madison being escorted into the police car. Footage of me standing at the altar, eyes blazing, the moment the screen lit up with Franklin's betrayal. It had all gone viral. Friends called, neighbors whispered, even clients I'd known for years sent polite, awkward emails about taking a break. I couldn't blame them. Who wanted their accountant to be the center of a tabloid scandal? I spent the first few days locked in the house with the curtains drawn, my phone face down on the counter. Aisha visited every day, bringing food I didn't eat and updates I didn't want. Elijah stayed too, alternating between fury and exhaustion. "I keep thinking about her," he said one night, pacing the kitchen. "About Madison. About how close I came to marrying her. I don't even know what's real anymore." I looked at him, his face shadowed in the dim light. "She fooled you, Elijah. But that doesn't make you a fool. It makes you human." He gave a bitter laugh. "Feels like I inherited Dad's curse for trusting the wrong people?" "No," I said firmly. "You're nothing like him. You face the truth. That's more courage than he's ever shown." A week later, I finally walked into my lawyer's office, clutching the folder I'd kept ready for months. Inside were the signed divorce papers, bank statements, and every piece of evidence we'd uncovered. My lawyer, Marissa, greeted me with a sympathetic smile. "You sure about this, Simone?" "I've never been more sure," I said. Her pen moved swiftly, her tone all business. "With what you've got, this will be quick. He won't have a leg to stand on." I nodded numbly. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted release. When the papers were filed, I felt the first real breath I'd taken in weeks. It wasn't joy. It was survival. Madison's legal troubles escalated fast. The embezzlement case against her was airtight. She had forged invoices, transferred funds, and covered her tracks poorly. Her law firm released a statement disowning her immediately. Within a month, she was sentenced to 2 years in a minimum security facility and ordered to repay everything she'd stolen. Her family's influence couldn't save her. The judge on her case was ruthless. The Ellington name, once synonymous with prestige, became a punchline in local gossip. Franklin's downfall was quieter but no less devastating. He was fired from his firm when the financial irregularities came to light. Colleagues distanced themselves. Friends stopped answering his calls. Even his own brother released a statement condemning his actions. I didn't hear from him at all, not a word, not even a text. It was as though he had vanished completely, leaving behind the wreckage of the life we had built together. Elijah and I tried to find a new rhythm in the silence that followed. He threw himself into therapy, confronting his pain with the same determination that once drove his career. I started small, returning to work, one client at a time. Some came back, hesitantly at first, then steadily as the scandal's flames cooled. I learned how to move through the world without the shadow of Franklin trailing behind me. I learned what it meant to be alone and unafraid. Yet beneath it all, there lingered one final thread of unfinished business. 2 weeks after the wedding, a letter arrived in a plain white envelope. The handwriting was neat, careful. The name in the corner made my heart drop. Asterisk Nicole Jenkins asterisk. I hadn't heard that name in years, not since Franklin's old company days. She had been a quiet, unassuming woman, kind eyes, polite smile, the kind of person you'd forget in a crowd. The letter was short, only a few paragraphs. She apologized for the pain her past with Franklin had caused and explained that her daughter, Zoe, had recently discovered the truth. She wrote that Zoe was struggling to understand everything and wanted to meet Elijah and me. I sat at the kitchen table with that letter for 3 days. I didn't know what to do. The girl, his daughter, was an innocent in all this, but every time I thought of her, I felt the old wound rip open again. When I finally showed Elijah the letter, he read it in silence, then looked up with a steady expression. "I want to meet her," he said simply. "She's my sister. She deserves to know who we are." His words were calm, but they hit me like a wave. He was right. Zoe didn't choose this any more than we did. And yet meeting her meant reopening the past one last time. Still, I couldn't deny him that chance. Or myself. The closure I didn't even realize I still needed. So I picked up the phone. My hands trembled as I dialed the number scrawled at the bottom of the letter. Nicole answered on the second ring, her voice soft, tentative. We spoke quietly, awkwardly, agreeing to meet at a cafe halfway between our towns. When I hung up, I sat there for a long time staring at the phone. For the first time since that disastrous day, I felt something stir inside me that wasn't pain. It was fear, but also in some fragile way, hope. Because even though the story of Franklin and Madison had ended in betrayal and ruin, this meeting felt like the first fragile step towards something new, something that might, one day, be whole again. The cafe was small and quiet, tucked into the corner of a sleepy little town halfway between Atlanta and Savannah. It smelled of cinnamon and roasted coffee beans, a scent that carried both warmth and nostalgia. Elijah and I arrived early, the morning sun pouring through the wide windows and glinting off the silver teaspoons laid neatly on the table. My fingers fidgeted with the edge of a napkin, twisting it until it frayed. Elijah sat across from me, calm but tense, his knee bouncing under the table. "You okay?" he asked gently. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't even know what I'm supposed to feel. Nervous, angry, relieved?" He reached across the table and placed his hand on mine. "Just be yourself, Mom. That's enough." I nodded, grateful for his steadiness, though my chest felt like it was tightening by the minute. Every second that ticked by on the wall clock brought me closer to facing the living, breathing reminder of my husband's ultimate betrayal. And yet somewhere beneath the dread, I could feel something else. A quiet whisper of curiosity, of possibility. The door opened with a soft chime. Nicole Jenkins stepped inside first, her eyes scanning the cafe until they found us. Time had changed her. She wasn't the woman I remembered from Franklin's office parties. The years had carved lines of exhaustion into her face, but her eyes were kind. Behind her stood Zoe, and in that instant my breath caught in my throat. She was tall and slender, with a nervous poise that made her seem older than 15. Her hair was pulled back neatly, and she clutched a worn paperback against her chest like it was armor. But it was her eyes, the same deep, dark brown as Franklin's, that stopped me cold. I felt the air leave my lungs in a rush, and for a moment all I could do was stare. She was his mirror, his eyes, his shape of jaw. But there was something softer, too, something of Nicole, something innocent and uncertain. "Mrs. Daniels?" Nicole said quietly, offering a tentative smile. I stood, forcing myself to breathe, and extended my hand. "Simone, please," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. She nodded gratefully, her hand cool in mine. "This is Zoe." The girl stepped forward shyly. "Hi," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment none of us knew what to say. The silence between us was thick with history neither of us had chosen. It was Elijah who finally broke it. "You like Agatha Christie?" he asked, nodding toward the book clutched in Zoe's hands. Her face brightened just a little. "Yeah, my mom got me into her. I'm reading Asterisk, and then there were none asterisk." "Good choice," Elijah said, smiling softly. "That one's brutal." She laughed, a quiet, uncertain sound that carried the faintest glimmer of something, maybe hope. And just like that, the tension cracked open enough for us all to breathe again. We talked for hours. At first it was surface level, school, hobbies, favorite shows, but gradually it deepened. Zoe told us about her dreams of studying forensic psychology, about her love for painting, about how she'd always known something was strange about her father's absence. Mom never told me much, she admitted, glancing at Nicole, who nodded softly. "I didn't even know his name until last year. I tried not to ask, but then—" She hesitated. Then the news came out. The words hung in the air, heavy and brittle. I could see the pain flicker across her face, the shame that didn't belong to her. "I'm so sorry," I said quietly. "None of that was your fault." Zoe looked at me, and in her eyes I saw a reflection of the young girl I once was, lost, unsure, desperate to make sense of a world that had betrayed her. "I know," she said softly, "but it feels like it sometimes." After lunch, we took a short walk around the square. The day had turned warm, sunlight spilling over the cobblestones, a soft breeze rustling through the trees. Elijah and Zoe walked ahead of us, talking easily now, laughing at shared jokes about bad coffee and high school teachers. Watching them, something inside me loosened. There was no bitterness in Elijah's smile, no resentment in Zoe's eyes. Just two young people, siblings by blood and strangers by circumstance, trying to bridge the gap left by a man who had failed them both. Nicole walked beside me in silence for a while before speaking. "I didn't know he was still married," she said finally, her voice trembling. "When I met him, he told me he was separated. By the time I found out the truth, I was already pregnant." I nodded, not surprised. Franklin's lies had always been artful, seamless. "He told me once he had a colleague who left town suddenly," I said, more to myself than to her. "I never thought to ask why." Nicole stopped walking. "If I could go back, I'd do it differently," she said softly. "I'd tell you. I'd tell her, the other woman, anyone. But I was scared." I turned to look at her. There was no anger left in me, just the dull ache of understanding. "You were trying to survive," I said. "We all were." When it was time to leave, Zoe hugged Elijah first, then she turned to me. I hesitated, unsure how to move, but she stepped forward, wrapping her arms around me with a tentative gentleness that shattered me completely. I hugged her back, feeling her small shoulders shake. "I'm glad I met you," she whispered. "Me too," I said, my throat tight. "You're family now, Zoe, whether you like it or not." That made her laugh through her tears. Nicole smiled faintly, tears glimmering in her own eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for giving her a chance." I shook my head. She gave *1. The drive home was quiet. Elijah looked out the window, lost in thought, the sun flickering across his face. "She's amazing," he said finally. "Strong, smart, brave." "She is," I agreed. "Stronger than I would have been at her age." We drove in silence for a while before he spoke again. "Do you think you could ever forgive Dad?" I stared at the road ahead. The question hung heavy between us. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I think I can stop hating him. That's a start." That night, after Elijah went to bed, I stood on the porch with a glass of wine, looking up at the stars. The air was cool and clear, the world impossibly still. For the first time in what felt like forever, my chest didn't ache. The weight of the past hadn't vanished, but it had shifted. Lighter somehow, manageable. The story of my marriage had ended in betrayal, but this strange fragile connection with Zoe, felt like a new beginning, a chance to build something honest from the ruins. Over the next few months, Zoe became a regular part of our lives. She came over on Sundays for dinner, laughing with Elijah over old family photos, asking me about recipes, helping Aisha in the kitchen when she visited. The house began to feel full again. Not in the old, suffocating way, but in a warm, quiet one. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at a photo of Franklin on the shelf, her expression unreadable. I never pressed her to talk about him. Some wounds needed time. Some truths had to rest. And for the first time in years, that was enough for me. It was a late summer evening when the past finally came knocking. Literally. I was folding laundry in the living room, the soft hum of a jazz record filling the air, when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Elijah was at Zoe's school event, and Aisha had just texted that she was running late from a case. The sound startled me, sharp and sudden in the quiet. I wiped my hands on a towel and went to answer it. When I opened the door, I froze. It was Franklin. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. He stood there on the porch, thinner than I remembered, his once carefully styled hair streaked with gray. The confident gleam that had always defined him was gone, replaced by something heavy and hollow. He held his hat in his hands, a gesture I hadn't seen from him since our early years together, and his eyes looked tired in a way I didn't know was possible. "Simone?" he said quietly. His voice cracked just slightly on my name. I should have slammed the door. I should have told him to leave, to crawl back to whatever corner of the world had tolerated him. But instead, I stepped aside. "Come in." He nodded and walked in, hesitating just past the threshold as if unsure he deserved to stand there. I noticed how his shoes were scuffed, how the sleeves of his shirt hung looser on his arms. He looked like a man who'd been hollowed out from the inside. "Can I sit?" he asked. I nodded, and he sank onto the couch, his hands clasped in front of him. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the faint hiss of the record spinning in the background. Finally, he spoke. I wanted to see you, he said softly. And Elijah. And... He paused. Zoe. The sound of her name from his lips made something sharp twist inside me. I sat down across from him, keeping my distance. She's doing fine, I said curtly. You'd know that if you'd ever bothered to check in. He winced. I didn't think I had the right, he said. After everything, after what I did, his words trailed off, heavy with shame. For the first time, I really looked at him, not as the man who'd betrayed me, but as someone broken by the weight of his own choices. His eyes were rimmed red, his jaw tight as if he were holding himself together by sheer will. I'm in therapy, he said suddenly, almost defensively. I'm trying to understand why I kept lying, why I destroyed everything good in my life. I know that doesn't fix it, but I need you to know I'm not the same man I was. I leaned back, studying him. People don't change that easily, Franklin. He gave a bitter smile. No, but sometimes losing everything forces you to try. He told me about his job, how he'd been fired from his firm, blacklisted in his industry. He'd sold his car, downsized to a one-bedroom apartment across town. He was working as a consultant now, barely making ends meet. It's quiet, he said, almost to himself. Lonely, but quiet. I've had a lot of time to think. And what have you thought about? I asked. He hesitated, then met my eyes. About you, he said simply. About how lucky I was. About how stupid I was to think I could have more when I already had everything. His voice broke then, his hands trembling. I'm sorry, Simone, for all of it. For the lies, for the humiliation, for stealing from our future, for Madison, for Zoe. I sat there, letting his words hang between us. I'd imagined this moment so many times, his apology, his regret. But I'd never thought it would come like this. Quiet, broken, stripped of all his defenses. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't hate him anymore. I hadn't for a while. I was just done. I forgive you, I said softly. He looked up, startled, as if he hadn't heard me right. Not for you, I continued. For me. Because I can't carry it anymore, Franklin. The anger, the pain, it's too heavy. His eyes filled with tears. Does that mean we can... No, I interrupted gently. It doesn't mean that. I forgive you, but I will never trust you again. We can't go back. He nodded slowly, his head bowed. I know. There was nothing left to say after that. He sat for a while longer, staring at his hands, then stood. Tell Elijah I'm proud of him, he said quietly. And tell Zoe. Tell her I'll try to be better, if she ever wants to know me. I walked him to the door. Before he stepped out, he turned back once more. You look happier, he said. Peaceful even, I nodded. I am. He gave a faint, wistful smile. Good. You deserve that. Then he was gone. That night, after I locked the door, I stood in the quiet and let the stillness settle around me. For the first time in years, my heart felt light. Not because Franklin had returned, but because he had finally left for good. I climbed into bed, the window open to the sound of crickets and the hum of distant cars. Weeks passed. Autumn rolled in, painting the trees in gold and crimson. Elijah was thriving in his new life, designing gardens and landscapes for clients across the city. He'd even started dating again, a kind, bookish woman named Lila, who made him laugh the way he hadn't in years. Zoe had become a fixture in our lives, joining us for dinners, helping me redecorate the townhouse. She was bright, full of life, and her laughter filled the house like music. Sometimes, she'd catch me watching her with a smile and say, What? I'd shake my head and tell her, You remind me of the good parts of him. She'd roll her eyes, pretending to be annoyed, but I could always see the little smile tugging at her lips. One evening, we were all together, Elijah, Lila, Zoe, Aisha, and me, sitting on the back patio under strings of lights. We were eating grilled vegetables and laughing at one of Aisha's stories about a case gone wrong. The sound of laughter, real and unforced, rose into the warm air. For a moment, I just sat there and watched them. The people I loved, this imperfect, rebuilt little family that had grown out of the ashes of betrayal. I realized that for all the pain, all the loss, something beautiful had taken root. Not the life I had planned, but the life I had earned. Later that night, after everyone left, I sat alone on the porch, the air cool and still. The stars stretched endlessly above, and somewhere inside me, the ache that had once defined me had finally gone quiet. The family I thought I had was gone forever, but the one I'd built, Elijah, Zoe, Aisha, even Lila, was real. It was messy, unpredictable, and imperfect, but it was mine. And as I sat there, I thought of the woman I'd been, the one crouched behind the hydrangeas, clutching a camera and a broken heart. I wished I could tell her that the pain wasn't the end of her story, that from the ruins would come something smaller, quieter, but truer, that one day she would breathe again, not because she forgot, but because she survived. So, if you've listened to my story all the way to the end, thank you. If you've ever been through something similar, if you've had your heart shattered and had to rebuild it piece by piece, know this: your pain does not define you. It transforms you. Please hit the like button on this video and comment the number 1 below. It lets me know you're here with me, that you've walked this journey too. Your support means everything. Be kind to yourself, and I'll see you next time.